October 2020, Pyongyang. Kim Jong-un unveils a tank the world has never seen before. Sleek, futuristic, something that looks like it could rival the best America or NATO has ever built. But defense analysts immediately ask the same question: is this North Korea's breakthrough, or the greatest military illusion of the 21st century? Because when you dig beneath the surface of that imposing exterior, the story of North Korea's tanks gets stranger and far more revealing than anyone expected. North Korea's tank story starts with leftovers, T-34s from World War II that fought in the Korean War, T-55s that were already outdated when they arrived in the 1960s, Chinese Type 59s that were basically T-54 knockoffs. For decades, Kim's army was running a museum of Soviet technology. But by the 1970s, they realized something crucial. South Korea was getting American M48 batons and preparing for M60s. North Korea needed something homegrown. Enter the Chonma-ho project, literally flying horse, their first serious attempt at indigenous tank production. Here's the thing, though. Indigenous meant taking Soviet T-62s and adding North Korean modifications. Heavy reliance on upgrades of old designs became their signature move, and that pattern would define North Korean tanks for the next 50 years. The Chonma-ho series, derived from the T-62, became the core of North Korea's armed force from the 1970s through to the 2000s. But these weren't revolutionary machines, they were incremental upgrades of Soviet technology. Each iteration added something new. Thicker armor here, ERA blocks there, crude fire control systems that looked impressive, but decades behind Western standards. The Chonma-ho 3 got better gun stabilization. The 4 added what looked like modern optics, but were probably just improved periscopes. The ERA blocks, however, they deserve special mention. North Korea loved slapping these reactive armor tiles all over their tanks because they looked incredibly advanced. The problem is, real ERA requires sophisticated explosive compounds and precise timing systems. Most experts suspected North Korea's versions were about as effective as metal lunchboxes. But here's what's fascinating. Even with all these upgrades throughout the 80s and 90s, the latest Chonma-ho variants were still far behind Western tanks and South Korea's new K-1. They had the appearance of modern armor without the substance. By 2000, it was clear they needed a completely different approach. Enter the Songun 915 in the 2000s, North Korea's attempt at a genuinely modern main battle tank. This was supposed to be their leap forward. Features like composite armor and laser rangefinders were claimed. Some reports suggested thermal imaging systems. On paper, it sounded impressive. In reality, it was produced in limited but notable numbers. Estimates range from 200 to 500 units, and it did introduce advancements like a 125mm smoothbore gun. It was more capable than prior models, though still not transformative on a global scale. But why the constrained rollout? Building modern tanks requires sophisticated metallurgy, electronics, and manufacturing capabilities North Korea simply didn't have in abundance. The Songun 915 taught them a valuable lesson. Looking modern and being modern are two completely different things. But sometimes, in the world of international relations, looking modern is enough. Which brings us to their masterpiece of military theater. Back to that 2020 parade, the M2020, also called Chonma-2, rolls out and changes everything. This wasn't just another upgraded T-62. The external appearance resembled a fusion of Russian T-14 Armata and Chinese VT-4 design elements. Clearly, North Korea had been studying the best tanks in the world. The reported features sounded incredible: a 125mm smoothbore gun as the main armament, ERA tiles covering the turret and hull, what appeared to be slat armor and cage armor for additional protection, thermal optics mounted prominently, a remote weapon station on top. The engine is believed to be an upgraded diesel, possibly around 1200 horsepower, though details remain speculative. Speculation suggests a 55-ton beast powered by an estimated 1200 horsepower engine capable of 44 miles per hour. The tank appeared relatively compact advantageous for Korean peninsula terrain. But here's where things got suspicious. Tank development usually takes decades. Germans spent 20 years perfecting the Leopard 2. Americans have been continuously upgrading the Abrams since the 1970s. Yet, North Korea supposedly jumped from 1960s technology to cutting-edge systems in just a few years. And despite the modern exterior, analysts noted something crucial. The suspension, basic architecture, and likely the drivetrain appeared to be built on old Soviet platforms. Maximum visual impact, but what about the substance underneath? Within months of the Chunma-2 debut, Western experts and defense analysts started using the same brutal term, Frankenstein tank. Why? Because this thing was widely seen as more propaganda tool than battlefield weapon, a mix of copied design cues from every major tank-producing nation. The skepticism was immediate and harsh. Those impressive ERA blocks, analysts doubted they were functional, suspecting they might be hollow or contain only basic explosive compounds rather than the sophisticated reactive armor systems used by modern militaries. The thermal sights that looked so advanced, possibly non-functional mock-ups designed purely for show. Real thermal imaging requires advanced sensors, signal processing, and display systems costing hundreds of thousands of dollars per unit. Technology North Korea has never demonstrated the ability to produce independently. Most damning of all, despite the modern exterior, experts believe the Chunma-2 was likely built on the same old Soviet drivetrain that had powered North Korean tanks for decades. It's like putting a Ferrari body kit on a 1960s engine. Impressive visually, yes, but fundamentally limited performance. The general expert consensus was brutal. Looks modern on the outside, but underneath, it's still 1960s technology, trying to masquerade as 21st century capability. This raised a critical question. How would this propaganda piece perform against real modern tanks? Here's what analysts found when they dug deeper into the Chunma-2's likely capabilities. Advanced electronics, absent or rudimentary at best. Modern fire control systems that allow tanks to engage multiple targets while moving, probably non-existent. Active protection systems that can intercept incoming missiles, not a chance. The power-to-weight ratio problem was especially telling. If these tanks truly use upgraded versions of old Soviet engines, their mobility would be severely compromised. Modern tanks need massive power to move their heavy, armored hulls at reasonable speeds. Poor power-to-weight means slow acceleration, limited maneuverability, and inability to relocate quickly after firing. Death sentences in modern warfare. But the biggest vulnerability? Modern anti-tank guided missiles. Weapons like the American Javelin and Israeli Spike can penetrate any armor North Korea has ever developed. These missiles have ranges exceeding 4 kilometers and use advanced guidance systems that make them nearly impossible to evade. The Chunma-2's ERA blocks, even if functional, weren't designed to handle top attack munitions that strike the thinner upper armor. Its thermal systems, even if real, lack the resolution and processing power to detect and engage modern threats effectively. In essence, even a fully functional Chunma-2 would have low combat survivability against peer-level conflicts. Let's compare what North Korea claims to have versus what their potential enemies actually field. South Korea operates the K-1 and the genuinely advanced K-2 Black Panther. The K-2 features legitimate composite armor, active protection systems, and fire control computers that can engage multiple targets while the tank moves at full speed across rough terrain. Its 120mm gun can actively engage targets at ranges where North Korean tanks couldn't even detect enemies. The United States fields the M1 Abrams, combat-proven in Iraq and Afghanistan, with continuous modernization keeping it at the technological cutting edge. You can also add advanced armor packages, thermal imaging that works in all weather conditions, and network capabilities that integrate with air support and artillery. Japan's Type 10 tank was designed specifically for the kind of mountainous, restricted terrain found on the Korean peninsula. Highly mobile, with advanced sensors and the ability to engage targets while positioned on steep slopes. Exactly the conditions North Korean tanks would face. Against these systems, North Korea is technologically outmatched and relies primarily on numbers and defensive terrain advantages. But numbers don't help when your tanks can't see, can't move effectively, and can't survive first contact with modern weapons. The technological gap isn't just significant, it's generational. Here's the most revealing evidence. Nobody knows exactly how many Chunma-2s exist, because production is secretive and limited. Best intelligence estimates suggest North Korea has built a small number so far, around a dozen prototypes confirmed by 2024, with mass production efforts ramping up in 2025, potentially reaching low dozens or more in elite units. Compare that to real military procurement. The United States produced over 10,000 M1 Abrams tanks. Russia manufactured tens of thousands of T-80s and T-90s. Even smaller powers like Germany produced their Leopard 2 in significant quantities, measured in thousands. North Korea's advanced tank production probably still measured in dozens overall. That's not a full-scale military program, that's a propaganda project with a defense budget. Meanwhile, North Korea still fields thousands of genuinely obsolete tanks. T-55s and T-62 variants from decades past make up the vast majority of their armored forces. Up to 5,400 tanks sounds impressive until you realize most would be sitting ducks against modern anti-tank missiles. The few modern tanks like the Chunma-2 are likely reserved for elite units, propaganda purposes, and symbolic defense of Pyongyang. They're not deployed to frontline units because there aren't enough of them, and because North Korea can't afford to risk their showpieces in actual training where they might break down or reveal their limitations. The story doesn't end with the 2020 reveal. Recent versions of the Chunma-2 unveiled in 2025, building on a 2024 exhibition variant sometimes called Tianma-2, feature what North Korea claims are active protection systems, 2 APS units mounted on the turret, each with 4 counter-munitions plus counter-drone elements. Active protection systems represent genuinely cutting-edge technology. Israel's Trophy system, Russia's Arena, and similar systems are among the most sophisticated defense technologies ever deployed on tanks. They require radar detection, computerized threat assessment, and precisely timed countermeasures. The idea that North Korea independently developed comparable systems, it strains credibility beyond breaking point. Real APS development costs billions, and it requires industrial capabilities North Korea has never demonstrated. More likely, these are elaborate mock-ups designed to look impressive in parades while providing zero actual protection. Each new upgrade generates international media attention and domestic pride, serving the propaganda purpose perfectly. But this reveals the real strategic purpose of North Korean tanks. So, why does North Korea keep building these questionable super tanks when the international community sees right through them? The answer is brilliantly calculated. These tanks serve 3 critical functions that have nothing to do with actual combat effectiveness. First, domestic prestige. Kim Jong-un needs to show his people that North Korea can compete with superpowers. The Chunma-2, rolling through Pyongyang, tells citizens that their country builds world-class military equipment. It doesn't matter if it's true, it matters that it looks convincing on state television. Second, military morale. Tank crews and military leadership need to believe they're getting modern equipment, even if the systems don't work as advertised. The appearance of advancement maintains confidence in the military hierarchy. Third, deterrence signaling. For international audiences, perception often matters more than reality in military deterrence. If South Korean and American planners have to assume that some percentage of North Korean tanks might actually be capable, that complicates defense plans and provides real strategic value. The Chunma-2 accomplishes all of these goals beautifully, regardless of whether its systems actually function. It's powerful theater in a geopolitical drama where symbols sometimes matter more than substance. What are North Korean tanks really like? The brutal reality is both simple and complex. The thousands of older tanks, they're genuinely obsolete museum pieces that would be massacred by any modern military equipped with contemporary weapons. A single modern attack helicopter could destroy over a dozen T-55s before their crews knew they were under attack. The newer, advanced tanks like the Chunma-2 are sophisticated propaganda tools designed to look impressive while likely lacking most of their claimed capabilities. They're elaborate theater pieces built for parades, not for battlefields. But that doesn't make them genuinely irrelevant. They serve crucial political and strategic purposes, even if they wouldn't survive actual combat. They maintain the military-industrial complex that keeps the regime in power, provide jobs for thousands of workers, and create the illusion of strength that helps deter potential enemies. The Chonma 2 represents the perfect embodiment of North Korean military strategy: maximum visual impact, minimal actual capability, but significant political value. It's a fake Rolex that looks impressive until someone actually needs to know the time. In a real conflict, these tanks would be destroyed quickly and decisively by modern weapons systems, but their true purpose isn't winning wars, it's maintaining regime legitimacy and projecting power in a world where perception often shapes reality more than actual capabilities do. That's what North Korean tanks are really like. Elaborate props in an ongoing geopolitical performance, where the real action happens far from the parade grounds of Pyongyang. They're powerful symbols of North Korean military aspirations, even when they fundamentally cannot deliver on those aspirations when it actually matters. The illusion is genuinely impressive. The underlying reality, far less so. In the complex world of international relations and nuclear deterrence, sometimes maintaining a convincing illusion, it's more valuable than possessing actual capability.